A very good morning to you, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this week's program of the situation. Now, this week we will discuss the African agenda. This is a very pertinent and very serious question. Topic generally that we are going to discuss. Chinua Achebe once said that until the lions have historians, the history of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. Now, in this case, African history has been written by people who do not belong to Africa, and therefore, these gentlemen you see here are ready to be the African historians who will eventually rewrite the history of Africa. Now, with me is Leo Chime from Nigeria, Collins Njoya from Cameroon, and John Jogu from Kenya. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, the African agenda. First of all, I want us to start by looking at the leadership of Africa. Many people have accused African leaders of lackluster performance, being lackadaisical when it comes to steering the development agenda of Africa. Mr. Leo Chime, what is your take on leadership of Africa?
First and foremost, I was discussing with my younger brother probably just a few days back. We were talking about the leadership in Africa and how it has led us to where we are actually at the moment.
Yeah.
So he's actually of the opinion that the African leaders are actually doing the best. My own understanding about Africa, when I look at the Jeff diagram, there's what we call the Jeff diagram of leadership. It's more about the relationship between the leaders and the followers. It's clear that the leaders are not doing a wonderful job. What I consider as a great leader is the ability to steer the followers in a direction that will actually, bring in positivity in the nation. So at the moment, at this moment, which I'm actually talking to you, discover that the African society is actually behind compared to the globe. We're actually still behind, when we make comparison with the globe.
So in your opinion, you were saying that the African leaders are not doing much?
No. Frankly speaking, they're actually still behind. As a matter of fact, they don't actually know what they are doing.
All right, Mr. Collins Njoya, what is your take on this?
That is a very serious question. But first of all, I would like to start by saying it's a very big shame on our leaders. I will take an example, or I will make reference back to my country. When you look at Cameroon as a whole, I was born when Mr. Biya was already the president. And up to date, Mr. Biya is still the president. Then now I begin to ask myself, what's the essence of education? Where are the youths? Why is it that in Africa, the old are still in power? Meanwhile, the young need to grow. So I would like to say, our African leaders are taking us backward because I believe their age does not permit them to deliver what we expect from them. So I think it is time for the youth to step up and take over from them.
Yeah, but Mr. Collins, normally there's a saying that what an old man can see while sitting down, you cannot see. The youth cannot see while standing up. So in other words, this what means that the old people are very wise.
Can I actually say, I'm going to disprove whatever you said. That's the old African proverbial saying. At the moment now, most of the African leaders are actually old. They are not wise. They have no wisdom. The wisdom actually belongs to the young generation, the younger generation.
On the contrary, I think what the old man can see is not right.
Yes.
Because they only see what is profiting themselves.
That's exactly
It's
right.
as simple as that. That's why that saying still wholesome water even today. Because these old men don't see what is good for the population, but they see what is good for themselves and their families.
Let's be frank, the African society is one of the most difficult societies to actually handle. I'm talking of African, when I mean African society, I'm talking of the different countries in Africa. It's difficult for an old man who is not willing to actually pull, the entire strength into steering the nation. It's difficult for them to handle the nation. That's the reason why you find that most nations that are being controlled by the older ones, they have failed woefully. Because they don't understand, the generation are changing, things are changing constantly. So to meeting up with the current trend in whatever is going on in the globe, they don't know, and they're not really interested. Most of these older men are not interested. They're only interested in safeguarding the pocket, or what the children, or the other generation of children, they are going to benefit.
Yeah, well, this one actually has been a very, very pertinent issue about leadership. Many leaders have been accused of, clinging to power. And apart from that, they've also been accused of hoarding wealth, trying to benefit themselves and their families. Mr. George, what is your take on this opinion?
I think the main problem, like I said, is the leaders. This is where the main problem is, because these leaders, the African leaders, they are not interested in developing the country. They are not interested in moving people from poverty index. They are only interested in making money for themselves and their families, And from long time ago, when the colonialists left our countries, I think what happened at that time when there was that changeover, the leadership that took over inherited everything, including corruption. And actually, after inheriting that corruption, they made it perfect. That's why we are even here today. That's why we are all facing the neo-colonialism in Africa from our own leaders.
Yeah.
That is why they are always clinging on to power, because they want to make sure that they protect what they have.
They have interest to protect.
They have to protect what they have looted.
Exactly. All right, so that is about leadership. Let's move to the next topic, guys. Resources. Africa is very rich in resources, and this is not disputed. In Africa, the resources are enormous, and the land is also very, very good for agricultural purposes. Are we actually taking proper use of these resources in Africa? Leo,
in terms of resources, when we start talking about resources, you discover that every part of Africa, they all have their main resources, which is actually of popular demand in most of the Western world. You will discover that, as a matter of fact, despite the fact they have all the best of resources in Africa, they are still underdeveloped. So which means there's a problem. If we're going to link up the resources with the leadership, you will discover that on most occasions, all the resources are being channeled down to, are being used to develop the foreign nations. All part of Africa, name it, is in Nigeria. They have all the resources you can think of. Kenya has all enormous resources, majorly in terms of with respect to nature. You have other parts in terms of Algeria, Angola, Cameroon. They all have all the resources, but yet, despite they have all these resources, you discover they are still underdeveloped.
Mm-hmm.
So Africa, in terms of resources, we have everything, but we're still behind.
Well, Mr. Collins, resources of Africa.
Yes, I would say Africa being rich in resources is an understatement. Why I say it's an understatement is because I believe that we have everything it takes to take us where we belong. The place where we are right now in Africa is not our place. We have all the resources that are needed, but you see, our leaders don't have the opportunities to exploit these resources. So they bring in the colonial master. I would like to call the Westerners colonial masters, because they were there before and they are still doing what they used to do. They will take these resources back to their own countries to use to develop. Meanwhile, we stay at the same spot. So I think that is my opinion. We have the resources, but we don't have the right people to exploit them.
Yeah, can I just add to that? There was, I think there's a case in DCR, Democratic DRC, sorry. There's a case of mining going on. It's not just in DRC. There are also all other parts of Africa where they actually land the plane on the mining site, get the resources, and take it back to wherever it's going to be utilized. So you can see there's still a gap.
So
this can only be done if the leaders can actually, sign on it or can actually approve of it.
So again, it boils back to the leadership of Africa.
It all boils back to leadership, because you see, you cannot disconnect the two, the resources and the leadership.
Yes.
You cannot disconnect them, because once, for example, if I may give an example of my own country, we have discovered oil.
Yeah.
There's
Even
a lot
also
of
bitumen.
things
There's
going
case of
on.
bitumen discovered
There's a
in
lot
Kenya.
of things going on. People rushing to Turkana to buy those plots of land so that they can then resell it back,
To the government.
right? And then the leadership cannot be able to mine that oil. So they have to bring in, like Mr. Collins said, they have to bring in the colonial masters. And what will happen is that when these colonial masters comes in, there will be some agreement between the colonial masters and the political leadership. Right? So that
that's really
this
right.
clique of political leaders will gain from the agreement that is going to be signed between the colonial masters and the leadership. So what happens is there is a clique that will benefit from the mineral resources.
And not the citizens.
Not the citizens.
Not the citizens.
You're 100% correct. The reason why I say you're 100% correct is because there's also there are cases whereby these colonial masters will actually incite violence. Try as much as possible to bring up a case of to make the people busy fighting against their leaders or fighting against whoever they want, maybe community, while the mining company can actually have a say in the mining field. So which means they engage the people in certain activity while mining will go on by these, same colonial masters. It happens in so many countries. I'm not talking of only DRC. It's also happening in the case of Nigeria and so many other parts of
Where there is a group of people who benefit from it.
there's always a case of people, mostly the colonial master, benefiting from cases like this.
And a few leaders
A few.
from different countries.
Mm.
So exploitation of resources from Africa is a very, very serious issue.
Yes.
And what about the human resource? Because Africa is also rich in human resource. And people have talked about brain drain. The creme de la creme of the African human resource moving out of Africa into the diaspora, to work there, because there's no employment in
Yes,
Africa.
there is no employment in Africa.
If you want to make reference to that, the cases of the likes of most of the doctors that work in the likes of US and some other part of US, mostly in US, you discover that there are some places in US where you have 70% of doctors coming from Ghana and around 50 to 60% coming from Nigeria. I'm talking of doctors. We're talking of doctors, which is actually a sensitive occupation back in Africa because of the cases or the crisis which they are undergoing. So you will have them, most of them actually move or they actually immigrate into a new country. They move out from their own country, moving down to a new country. So you have lots of cases. So in terms of human resources, the best place to actually get the human resources is Africa. And they know the reason why they actually come to Africa is because they are cheap. They consider the Africans as cheap labor. Just like Pastor Laskasa in the period of the 18th
Cheap
century.
but very competent.
They're cheap but extremely competent,
Yes.
not just very competent, extremely competent. So they feel that the economy is not really booming, caused by the leaders. And we cannot always get cheap laborers. We can extract them from here and go to a place whereby they do the same job which the same foreigners are doing, and they're getting well paid, and the Africans can actually get less paid for doing the same job.
Yes.
So where the major place which most of them actually focus on is Africa. But things are changing mostly in the educational sector.
All right. Well, neo-colonialism, another hot potato when it comes to African history. Now, we know what is happening in Africa right now. We know that the West and the East are trying to loot. In other words, if I can say loot, or probably they are coming to Africa and they have turned Africa into a battleground, supremacy battleground between the East and the West. A very good example is China wanting a piece of Africa, and also the US wanting a piece of Africa. Gentlemen, can you tell me something about Africa relationship with the rest of the world? Is it a case of neocolonialism, or is it a new era? Mr. George?
I think I don't want to. There is no way you will separate whatever is happening in Africa from the poor leadership.
Mm-hmm.
There is no way you can separate
I like that.
There is no way you can separate that, because it's like now there is a repartitioning of Africa again between the East and the West. All right? So if you look at what is happening between China and US, then you understand why whatever is happening in Africa is happening. Because China is looking at its population at this moment and in future. All right? And the reason why they are constructing roads and all that in Africa is maybe in the near future we will find ourselves living with Chinese people. It may happen. It may happen. Because when you see what they are doing is they are enticing the African leaders with some kind of loans, right? Loans to develop their own country. And then once you are given that loan, there is always a collateral. There is security for that loan.
For sure.
I will give an example of our country, Kenya. I think this issue of SGR, the loan that was given to Kenya, there was some kind of security, even if the government doesn't want to be clean. And the security, as they said, is the port of Mombasa.
Mm-hmm.
So if we default to pay the loan, then the Chinese will take over Mombasa port. What does that mean to you? It means they are taking over the country. If you look at the case of South Africa, I hear, I cannot say whether it is true or not, but I hear there is even some police officers from China in South Africa.
Police actually, it said that we have around 13 police posts in South
Isn't
Africa.
it different in
Chinese
Uganda?
police.
It's
And
like they
also,
are taking over.
Yeah, and also in Zambia, what is happening in Zambia right now? The Zambian government is unable to pay back the Chinese loan. The Chinese have now come in to take over very key government parastatals. They are the ones who are running these parastatals. And this is not that the case of these two candidates. It is happening all over
It is happening all
Africa.
over. It is happening all over. So when you default, then they take over.
Yes, Mr. Collins.
Yes, I think for Africa to solve this problem of neocolonialism, we need to unite. We need someone that will unite us. But I'm afraid, we all know what happened to Gaddafi when Gaddafi was trying to unite Africa. So we need people who are courageous, intelligent, that can take the lead, so that Africa can be united and become one, so that we are going to fight this spirit of neocolonialism.
And you're very, very correct by mentioning the likes of Gaddafi. Gaddafi failed because the people failed to unite.
Yes.
Now, if you look at the likes of what I call it, the home place of Gaddafi, which is Libya, you discover that it's all messed up.
It's messed up.
During the tenure of, during the terrain or during the time of Gaddafi, you discover that it was awesome. The Libyan citizen or the Libyans were actually getting a whole lot, but right now it's all messed up. The whole place has been broken. Now, if you want to go back, there's a saying by a man which is referred to as Marcus. Marcus Harvey stated that the only way that Africans can actually move forward is by most of the Africans in different parts of the world go back to Africa. When they go back to Africa, it simply means they have to develop their own nation.
Which is very correct.
And it's not just that. Now, Africans have resources which is of high demand all over the world. If Africans can decide to actually, decide to safeguard their resources, make African resources for African countries, there's what we call the African Union, so
Yes.
African
AU.
United Nations, or you say,
The AU, the AU, the African Union.
yeah, African Union.
African Union.
If we decide to actually have what's referred to, the African Union is actually functional. We keep African resources for Africans and make Africans, or Africa for Africans. You discover that the nation will have no choice but to develop itself. Let's go down to tourism, minerals, the likes of petroleum. I will mention all over the globe, one of the top 5 countries that produces an enormous amount of oil comes from Africa. Are you getting me? So both in tourism, petroleum, and even agriculture, the grounds of Africa is naturally, fertile. You can develop any source. So we don't lack food, we don't lack water in terms of fish and all that. We don't lack nothing. So if Africans can decide to say, okay, let's set aside, let's actually sit down to develop ourselves.
So generally, we have what we need. to
What we
develop
need.
Africa.
What
Because
we need.
you see,
But the thing is, sorry to cut you. The thing is that most of this, the colonial master will not allow such to happen.
yeah,
It
because
will only
like,
happen if the leaders will actually approve of that. The likes of Gaddafi, it's not just Gaddafi. What's the name of this young man from Zimbabwe? Is it from Zimbabwe? The famous guy who died of recently.
Mugabe.
You said?
Mugabe.
Mugabe. Yes, the
all
likes of-
is not
I said
all the
Old man, old
people,
man.
but young in
If you
mind.
look at him,
But
he's
young in
more or less
mind.
like he's young in mind.
Old,
He's old but
who was
young in
always
mind.
thinking about the African.
He was
people.
ever thinking about the
He
Africans.
never supported the colonial masters.
So like
Before that, I think what you are saying about the Africans who are abroad to come back and develop their country, I think the problem still boils down to the leaders.
Leaders, yes.
You
Still very
have to make it possible for me to come back.
absolutely.
Yes.
What processes are you going to put in place for me to feel now I can come back to my country and develop it? You must attract
You
me
must
to come
attract
back.
me.
If you don't, then I'll just.
That's it.
So generally, gentlemen, conspiracy theorists have coined several theories about why Africa is underdeveloped up to date. And one of the theories suggests that the West have come up with a policy, especially the United States of America, a policy where they bring aid to Africa, they bring medical aid in terms of vaccines and all these kind of things. And their main agenda actually is not to develop Africa, but to depopulate Africa. Because they need resources for themselves. They know that Africa is very rich in resources. And once the population of Africa goes down, they can always come in and take the resources, like you said, in the case of Democratic Republic of Congo. Sometimes it's not even, them depopulating Africa, but creating chaos and animosity, civil fights,
Unrest.
civil unrest within the African population. So once there is no peace, they can easily chip in and collect the resources. This is one of the theories.
Yes.
But then I want to believe that African leaders now is a wake-up call for them. And with the COVID-19, it might be a blessing in disguise because African leaders have realized that they can actually do without the West.
They can actually do.
What is your opinion, Collins?
True, but okay, you were
You
Collins,
can
yes.
talk first.
All right. Go ahead.
True, the Africans can do without the West, but if you look at the likes of Nigeria are still seeking for help from the likes of US and Germany. So our leaders are still demanding for resources, medical kit, test kit and all that from the likes of Germany. Now, if you look at in terms of Nigeria, there are several universities in Nigeria that have actually developed the likes of ventilator, some little kits,
Yes.
the likes of
Just for $60.
for $60, that's in different parts of the world.
That's Senegal.
Senegal. Now, if you look at things like that, will eventually happen. But the thing is, who is actually going to fund these programs? It's the government. So it's still going back to the old point, which is the leaders. So Africans can actually do without the likes of the Western masters. But the thing is that the leaders are not willing to give up that ties.
Yeah, Mr. Collins, what is happening
Yes.
in Cameroon?
I think COVID-19 is a blessing in disguise Because right now, if you look at the situation back in Cameroon, most of our leaders used to fly abroad for treatment. But right now, nobody has the opportunity to fly out. So now, I think it has built up their memories or their intellectual thinkings to understand that they need to build up hospitals. Like in Cameroon the other days when I was listening to the news, I heard they have built about, they have mounted about 200 beds for patients of COVID-19, and it was really impressive. Because if they could do that within 24 hours, it means we can do even more better.
Even in Nigeria, there's stable electricity. Can you imagine? In Nigeria, it's
All of a sudden.
very, very hard for you to get stable electricity.
And if you
All
look
right.
at the rate at which people are recovering from this COVID-19 in Africa, there is some encouragement. Like I was asking myself, why is it that in Cameroon, for instance, every day people are recovering? Like right now, we have about 800 recovered cases. And what are they using? Because they don't have the aid of the Western world. So what are they using?
Oh, Mr. George.
You are talking.
Just recently we saw that the government of Kenya said that they can only bring back the Kenyan citizens who are abroad, mostly in China, under their own cost. That's when they can bring them back. But then we saw the other day the ministers, the cabinet secretaries of transport and was it interior, at the airport lining up to receive a medical consignment from China. Instead of receiving their own, they receive a medical aid from China. What do you think, Mr. George?
Let me give you a simple scenario. How much money are we paying Raila Odinga? How much money are we paying Kalonzo Musyoka, who is not in the government? How much money are we paying Kibaki, the retired president? A lot of money as a retirement package. Why not take that amount of money and bring Kenyans back? It makes a lot of sense. It doesn't make any sense when you pay somebody who is already rich some amount of millions, Kenya shillings. It doesn't make any sense. This is what we are talking about. It still boils down to poor leadership.
And to add more to that, Kenyan have their own flight, right? They have their own airline.
It's a simple
Why
answer.
do
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Why
They
should
can-
the
they can
president
just
not
take-
sign a decree?
and there is, Mr. Collins, there is a kitty for COVID-19,
Yes.
which they
Even
only
40
need
billion.
to fuel one Dreamliner to bring all the Kenyans from China back. Simple. It's all about leadership.
Just the case of Nigerians, and for Nigerians in the likes of UAE, they are being told to pay certain amount of money before they are actually going to be brought back to Nigeria. Are you telling me that the government does not have certain amount of money to bring back her citizens down to Nigeria?
The government has money.
So that's the
There
thing.
is a lot of money in the
There's a lot
government.
of money.
It's a shame.
And it is not their money, it is our money.
It is our
We
money.
pay these taxes. So painful.
So, gentlemen, what is the way forward? What is the way forward? We can see, you see, so many things are happening, and the governments of Africa actually have seen what the West is capable of doing, but yet they still roll the red carpet, for these Westerners in Africa. What is the way forward? What is the way forward, Mr. Collins?
Yeah, to me, I think the way forward is for the leaders to step down and for the young to rise up and take over power and implement what we think it is right and what we have been learning in school, the knowledge we have acquired. And also, I also think it's time for all of us abroad to also start thinking of going back home to develop our own countries. Because there is no point where we are walking out of the countries where we are being segregated, we are being discriminated upon. It is time for us to look back home, change our leaders, and then we go back home and use the human resources to develop our own nations.
Mr. Leo?
Actually support what Mr. Collins said. The only way forward is for Africans to actually recognize that the only place they can actually develop themselves is Africa. If they go back home and they actually focus on developing the African society, Africa will be at its peak. That's the factual truth. Then secondly, the leaders in almost all nations in Africa, we need young leaders, not the old men, the old sick men. That's actually the way I should put it. Most of the leaders in Africa are actually old and sick and incompetent. So if the young blood decides to take over, not recognizing the fact that most of the young bloods are also corrupt, we should note and take note of that. If we're going to be voting in the young blood, we should vote in somebody who is willing.
Somebody visionary.
Yes, a visionary who is willing to change Africa and steer Africa in the right direction.
Mr. George, east or west or is best?
I think for me the way forward, and this is my own opinion, I think it is time to ask ourselves this question. Who is the employer here for the leaders?
The
common
citizens.
man.
It is the people.
The people.
So it is the people who needs to rise up and fire these guys. We need to start firing these guys.
So are you trying to call for revolution?
Exactly. We need to start firing these guys. Not in a way of killing them or anything like that. We need to start saying no.
If you call for
We need to start to stop worshipping them, because this is what happens. We need to rise up and we need to fight for our own freedoms. If we don't do that, these guys will still continue messing us. So it is time for us to start using these kind of forums. We educate one another and we know what is our right and we start fighting for it.
And Mr. Dan, to add more, I think for Africa to get to its destination, we also need a lot of prayers. We need God. We cannot only say by word of mouth that we will do this. We also need a lot of prayers, because I believe that the colonial master will not let us get to destination.
Collins, not to disrespect you, God is not the only thing we need in terms of this. We do need Africans to actually stand up to say that yes, Africans belong to Africa belong to Africans. Because if you're almost all part of African continent, you discover that you have a whole lot of prayer ground, churches. Mostly in Nigeria, you have lots of churches, but Nigeria is still a fractured society. So it's not just about calling God; it's about doing the needful. When it's time for election, we cannot say because of poverty our mind becomes shallow. Because right now in Africa, it's not just poverty of material; it's poverty of the mind. That's one of the greatest problems which we have in Africa. Because the mind of the Africans is actually polluted, and it's so small that people they don't look out for the bigger picture. No one is interested in tomorrow. They're only looking out for today.
So gentlemen, it is like you said, it's in forums like this that we can inculcate that the power and the ability to forge Africa forward. So at the situation, ladies and gentlemen, we believe that by letting you know what is happening around us, a change can be triggered within you, and then you can change what is happening around you. So we believe that through a forum like this, the situation, we can create awareness to our fellow Africans, and then we can move Africa forward. Your parting shot, Collins. We are closing up. Your parting shot.
Yeah, I just want to say hi, and that please stick to this, and together we will build Africa.
Mr. George.
Well, I would like to call on all Africans to stop worshipping their political small gods and use their own brains. Look at a leader and look at the qualities that you would want to see in a leader. Don't look at the amount of money they are going to give you. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Leo.
Africans, know thyself what. What you want is what you should stand for. I'm not just talking of Africans, both in African continent and the African continent as a whole. I'm also talking of the Africans in the likes of North America, South America, wherever the world is, whatever globe they are in. If you look at the likes of US, for instance, you discover that most cases of death are happening mostly as a result of COVID-19 is mostly the blacks. So which means they are not being catered for, they are not being looked after for, or they are not being taken care of. So Africans themselves, you know your what. Why stay in a place whereby you're not regarded? I'll still go back to my old saying of Marcus Garvey, which says that, Marcus Garvey, which says that, come back to Africa, develop the African society, make it worthwhile, that people become envious of the African society.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. We've come to the end of this program. Please stay tuned to our next program. Make sure you follow us on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. Until next time, stay safe. Thank you.